live
We are
from KHD headquarters. Do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do.
Welcome to the Krista Hermanson Design Podcast, where we talk about everything interior design and renovations. Over the next few episodes, we're going to be talking about furniture layouts, and we're starting with dining areas. So if you're a design lover, come along.
Furniture layouts can be particularly challenging to homeowners. You have so much that you need to figure out. How does your family live? What type of activities take place inside your homes? And what are long-lasting functional pieces that are going to work really well to meet the needs of your family? So today, Britt and I are going to talk about different rooms of the home and how we might assist you in making some of these expensive but valuable decisions.
In recent years, there's been a big push for open concept floor plans, and we've kind of lost that formal dining room, but we've been seeing it coming back in a big way. So let's talk about how to furnish kitchen nooks, open concept dining rooms, and that formal dining room.
Okay, well, let's start with kitchen nooks then. So the first thing to consider is adjacencies and what we call room circulation, which is the ability of bodies to move around spaces inside a room. A lot of nooks are built now adjacent to back doors or deck doors. And so in addition to considering the amount of seating space that you're going to be able to include in the space, you also need to think about traffic coming in from outside in order to access your main kitchen family room area. Usually there's a grill or maybe an outdoor area off of people's back doors, and there's a lot of traffic coming and going because of that. Also kids going in and out to play. So make sure that you allow at least 36 inches of clearance space, even up to 48. It depends on the scale of your home. Now, in order to figure out what size of table you need to start with an understanding of how much side-to-side space you need per diner. What you need to know as a takeaway here is that for each seated diner, the amount of space that you need for a place setting and for a chair setting is typically about 24 inches. So your tape measure is your friend. Now, in a more formal dining situation like this one, you can expand that space to 27 to 30 inches. That's a nice, generous side-to-side space per diner. But if you're fitting, 18 people around the family for Christmas dinner, you can certainly get away with as little as 18 to 20 inches as well. But that means you're friendly and you're getting closer to shoulder, especially if some of your diners are larger, more broad-shouldered men.
Okay.
But that's a good basic guideline.
Okay, so you'll sort of measure the room and then subtract those clearances to sort of find the right shape and size of your dining room? Or dining table,
Yeah,
sorry?
I think that's a really good practical way to do it. So for example, if you have a breakfast nook area with an entranceway into it, you need to allow for the door swing if the door swings into that space. And that should, if it's an exterior door, it'll be 36 inches wide if it's to code. So that would give you enough space for a body to come into that space from outside and still allow clearance if they're holding like a tray or maybe a larger item or a child. Then what's remaining, so from that 7-foot space, you lose the first 3. That gives you 4 feet or 48 inches to drop in a table and have some seating arranged around that. And often if it's a nook that is cantilevered or extends sort of into the backyard off the kitchen area, immediately adjacent to the kitchen area, then it can be really, really helpful to build a bench, some kind of a nook bench seating. And that can be a wireframe, like one of the examples that we're showing here, or it could be a more built more like a furniture piece and almost like a banquette, if you like.
So first off, we're going to look at one of our Discovery Ridge projects. And this one is the one that backs onto a park and has the inward swing of that door. So if you want to just chat about what we did here, Krista.
Yeah, we had several considerations that we thought about in terms of space planning for this. One was the door swing and the access point to the backyard. But the other part of it was like they're right on a park and the deer come strolling along that park belt behind the house. So we wanted to provide a space where several people could gather and enjoy those views on both angles with their back to the sunshine, or also on this side, on this face of it, to be able to sit and enjoy the feeling of being kind of almost out into nature in that space. So we did minimal window coverings. We did a very light feeling banquette that has a steel support across the back so that people can lean comfortably into it and not feel like they're going to go through the window, which is a very important safety consideration. But it's neat and it's tucked out of the main traffic area and still allows access to the deck through that back door.
Is that why we used a circular table here instead of an oval table, just to give a little bit more clearance? I
like circular or oval tables for banquettes because they don't have sharp corners that you kind of have to navigate yourself along the bench and around. And also they're great for children because they're safer. There's just fewer sharp edges and sharp corners for them to bang themselves on. So it's a nice way to feed multiple children and contain them, if you will.
That's a really good thing. I mean, I know my kids have gotten goose eggs from corners of tables. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So we also consider the ages of the people that are living in the space, and of course, safety considerations with children are very specific.
So in the next one, the layout is almost identical to the one you were just talking about, but in this one, we didn't opt for a bench. We opted for seating for 6. So could you kind of explain why we decided to do that, not to do a bench in this case?
So this is another property that has beautiful views out the back of the house. And we wanted to allow for 6 people because this family of 5 often has an extra kid, whether it's a friend or a neighbor, there for dinner. But we were limited by the sill of the window in that back window. So what we decided to do instead was we relocated the chandelier in the nook and we snuck the table just a little bit towards the kitchen and away from the entranceway, which is also on the left-hand side of the room here, in order to allow traffic out to the deck and out to the grill. But we were able to do that with, again, an oval table because there are no sharp corners and it takes a little bit less depth. It's a slightly narrower, longer table. And then we did, again, soft chairs that are really cozy that will tuck neatly under the table in order to allow for maximum free access in and out through that door.
And that door gave us a little bit more space because it did open outward, which was easier to fit that in there.
Yeah, so that's the other thing you need to think about is door swing and where that door lands adjacent to your breakfast nook. This is such a common layout in Calgary. I've seen this in I don't know how many homes over the years.
Yeah, that's exactly why I wanted to kind of go over these particular ones, because so many of us have these layouts and we're going, how do we find the right pieces to go in them? So from there, we have a similar layout, but this one has a nice bay window and an inside swing. Do you want to just talk about what we did with that kitchen and why we decided for that type of custom bench?
Had so much fun solving the problems in this particular space. There is an entry point immediately adjacent to this one as well. And when we reconfigured the kitchen, I wanted to create a landing space so that the family could enjoy a meal together or do homework while one parent cooks and feel part of the kind of heart of the kitchen area. So this one we built as a little bit more of almost a sectional, if you like, but taller. and more upright.
Mm.
Its standard table height is 30 inches. So we were working with a 30-inch dining table surface. And the banquette we built at 18 inches from the floor, which is a standard dimension for adult seating. So with those two figures in mind, we elongated that space to create a bench area, but we turned it so that family members could actually be facing each other and sit in a nice cozy circle. In addition to that, chairs can be added on the other side. Like when the grandparents come to visit, we just pull a couple of chairs in from the dining room, and it's a beautiful gathering space for 6 or 7 or even 8 people could comfortably fit around that 66-inch long table that's maybe about 30 inches deep.
So I've noticed that in these examples that we were showing, the first example had pot lights, but the other two kitchen nooks had more statement chandelier pieces over the table. Was there a reason for that? How do people know what's the best option for their kitchen nook?
That's a great question, Britt. So when you're doing areas that are adjacent to each other and within the sight lines of each other, you need to consider or choose, if you like, your moment. And light fixtures can be such a dramatic and beautiful focal point in a room. So this first breakfast nook example, where we've got the door adjacent and the windows around it, is also immediately adjacent to a very dramatic island with 2 oversized dome lights over it. So I didn't want to have anything competing with that. It's about balance in the room, and this is really the second axis of the room. The first axis had this beautiful big island with the cooktop down there, and then these big dome lights over the island, which were gorgeous and dramatic. Then balancing that at the opposite end of the room, we had a very dramatic built-in with a beautiful stone fireplace. For that single axis, with the 2 focal points at each end of the axis, were really the star statements of the room. The little nook that is adjacent to it, I wanted it to be a bit quiet and not compete with the drama of these 2 strong elements that anchored the room. So I treated the lighting very quietly, and I allowed the backdrop of nature to be as much of the focal point as that little area itself. That's in the first one. In the second example, we had lighter, smaller elements in the adjacent kitchen, which again, this area was open to. So we took some themes from that. They're actually circular, the lighting pendants over the island in that kitchen. And we used a more square shape as a counterpoint to make it not repetitive and to also be the stronger element in the room, because it's actually got more of the dark metal on it. And when you walk into this space, the first thing you see is actually this beautiful view with the breakfast nook, with this gorgeous fixture anchoring it above. And then you look right or left at the kitchen or the family room, and that's where you see the balancing focal points there. So it works really, really well in these particular kitchen layouts. And the third example is sort of the opposite of that. We did very clean lighting in the kitchen itself. There's no island area. So what we wanted to do was add some dramatic lighting over the breakfast nook, because that really anchored sort of the center of the room in a beautiful way without competing with anything we had going on in the kitchen.
Sometimes our houses are not built necessarily with our lighting boxes in the place that maybe we might want them to be. What would you suggest if it's not in the right place? How do we figure out what the right place is as well?
Well, I think the first thing that you need to figure out is what size of table are you going to have underneath this lighting. Determine the size of the table relative to the size of the room, keeping in mind, 30 inches or so on each side of the table to allow for a seated diner. the circulation, the number of bodies that you need to fit into the room. Once you have determined the size of your table as sort of the anchoring piece for the room, then you would figure out if you are going to have to relocate your electrical box in the ceiling. Now, there are two ways to do that. One is to hire a licensed electrician.
The only way?
Well, it's the only way to do it. Or you could you could drop your light fixture on a longer extended chain, and you could swag it to the right location. So the second option is a cheap and cheerful way to relocate your lighting. Maybe you're in a rental place or a temporary place, and you don't want to go to the trouble of relocating the box in the ceiling. It's a couple, maybe $300 to have an electrician come out and do that, depending on the complexity and the amount of support and the size and weight of the fixture you're putting in. So there are all these considerations. There are always considerations when it comes to construction. But you can potentially swag it if you're looking for a cheap and cheerful way to relocate that. Otherwise, you need to work with a licensed electrician to relocate it in the room. And then, of course, you'll have some ceiling repair as part of that work that needs to be done to finish it off nicely. I think, when it comes to lighting, dimmers are your friend. It's not super expensive to have an electrician change a regular light switch to a dimmer, and that will completely change the way you are able to live in your spaces. I always think about layering lighting, and then ways to add lighting using non-expensive things like additional tabletop light fixtures or maybe lamps on your buffet. They're a great way to add layers of lighting without the expense of putting in new pot lights in your ceiling. So they're a great sneaky designer trick to get the layers of lighting and the mood, that hygge mood in your dining areas when you're entertaining.
Awesome. No, those were some great tips. And now I think we'll move on to talking about dining rooms. Because these dining rooms, it's a great segue. They have incredible lights in them. We do enjoy the formal dining room lighting. So in this first one here, oh my gosh, I am all about these silver bubble lights that are so romantic.
I love this dining room because we took this previously lonely, sad space and created this beautiful gathering place for friends and family. And this is such a vivacious family. It was important to give them somewhere to properly entertain. So we did a lot of things, and lighting was very important in this room. We added lamps, which are a really nice way to add some layers of lighting if you don't already have pot lights in your existing dining room. So just think about adding even some little lamps to balance off either end of your buffet to add some layers of lighting, or you can use little freestanding lights like these. I will often use a cluster of lights like this across a dining room table if I don't have the ability to layer the lighting through either dimmers or the existence of pot lights or spectacular chandeliers. So these can be super friendly. They are rechargeable and super, low fuss.
I love how in this space, the table is so dark and anchors and relates to the beam in the ceiling.
Yeah. We wanted to, we had a beautiful peak in that dining room, so I really wanted to call attention to it. So we wrapped a faux beam down the length of that, over the length of that dining table, and then we dropped the chandelier from that, and it's just beautiful. It turned out to be such a cozy, comfortable room. Additionally, we added dining chairs that are super comfortable to sit in. I am such a huge believer in upholstery in dining rooms. The trick is to use high heavy duty fabrics, high rub content, things that are wipeable, things that are stain proof. So regardless who's over for dinner, whether they're 2 years old or 42 years old, if a spill happens, it's not a big deal. It's just easy to wipe up.
Moving on to our last formal dining room example.
Okay. This dining room is absolutely set up to be one of the more formal dining rooms that we've touched. We didn't touch the framing, and we had the 2 openings kind of pre-existing. Because there are 2 openings in this room, the double doors at one end and then the pocket door on the other side, we still needed to allow traffic to allow people to move through those rooms if they decided to take a shortcut, or also to allow for the serving and removing of various courses at dinner. So we left that traffic area open with a buffet behind it to use as a point to serve from. And we anchored the dining table with a spectacular made in Czechoslovakia dining fixture that is a one-of-a-kind handmade piece of art. Yeah. Actually, when we fired it up with the electrical, it went, ah, when we turned it on.
I can believe it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a beautiful fixture. This dining room had lots of room for a larger formal table, and they wanted to be able to seat 8 to 10. And we could certainly scooch some extra chairs around this table to make that work. We have those chairs in the breakfast nook in another part of the home that are a similar size, so we could easily pop one at each end of the table as king and queen chairs, and then have the smaller chairs around each side of the racetrack shape table.
It is a substantial table. I love how the post is in the center. So when you're talking about being able to fit all those chairs, there's no post in the corner. It's really quite easy to slide a couple of extra chairs there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love tables that have a central support through the middle of them, because what it does is it allows people to, you can squeeze an extra body in. I have a rule in my household, and it's that there's always room for one more. So it allows you to have that flexibility to squeeze an extra body or 2 in and make it super cozy. So central pedestal tables that don't have legs on the corner are a really effective way to maximize your seating area, and also to be able to have your table flex to accommodate large family gatherings like Christmas dinners versus day-to-day dinners with, the people who live in your house full time.
Okay, we've talked about breakfast nooks. We've talked about formal dining rooms. And now for the end. Many Calgarian homes, as I mentioned in the beginning, open concept has just been, rampant for the last, 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of homes that don't have a breakfast nook or a formal dining room.
Right.
It's right in the middle of their living room and their kitchen. So will we be able to talk just about, how to set that up and how to make that your dining area relate well to the rest of the spaces?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, we've kind of touched on this a little bit already, and that is that you need to choose your moments or choose your locations for big statements and for drama. So in this particular family room, we didn't do anything to the fireplace. The homeowners liked the existing fireplace entertainment center at one end of the room, but we did completely reimagine and reinvent the kitchen. We downsized the island to make it manageable for the homeowner, and we also maximized the seating there by eliminating the post legs, which is a great example of what we were actually just talking about. And then in the middle of that space, we turned the table on its axis and dropped a beautiful, quite dramatic light fixture above that table to anchor the dining area. We wanted to create a gathering area that wasn't so formal and that allowed the family to have like 20 people over in this great room, if you will, kitchen, dining area, family room adjacency, that just allows for lots of freedom with seating. A great example of sort of using a light hand, but using lighting in a variety of ways. The sconces on the cooktop wall, not an overpowering piece over the island, a larger scale piece over the dining room to anchor that area, and even what we added in the adjacent front hall area, right? Because it's all one great big open room. It shows you how to layer lighting with a nice mix.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Krista. Next week or next podcast episode, whenever we drop that, we'll be talking about living room layouts and doing furnishings for your living room. So thank you, and we'll see you next time, guys.
Bye-bye.